Right.
And in progress. I love it. Thanks everyone for joining today. I'm Scott Nunes. I'm excited to have this convo with Nick and Marnie. Let me give you a little bit of or really their origin story. Nick and Marnie worked together at Performance Matters, now a part of Power School. Marnie and I connected at a Power School conference in 2019. That's why that Eye of the Tiger was very fitting at
For those of you that came in
about
late, that's what we were jamming out to in the
yeah, we
green
were jamming
room.
out too. So a little bit of an inside thing there, but not too long after, the two of you left the education space and started, scaled, and sold the company. That's amazing. And then we reconnected, Marnie,
Yeah.
when I worked at Canva, as you all wrote, Lead It Like Lasso. Great book, by the way. Pick that one up too. And we always knew we'd work on something together. I think that's the really cool thing here. And then we recently reconnected, and you gave me a sneak peek in your current project.
Yeah.
Immediately, I knew I wanted in. Essentially, the two of you, you came, you saw, you conquered, and now you're bringing that expertise and prowess to students and education institutions everywhere, right?
Well, Scott, I don't know about Concord, but what I can tell you is this, that Marty and I, for years, we've talked about our passion really to help young people stand out, make an impact in the world. And we feel real fortunate that through our work and our experiences, we're able to focus on that at this point in our career. And we are super excited to be here today.
Likewise. And I was excited when Marnie sent me an advance copy of the book you have coming out in a few weeks, The Business of You. And when I read it, I thought a couple of things. First, they nailed it, just like they did with Lead It Like Lasso. And they've done it again. Like, how is this possible? How do you go from a book, best-selling book to another one and knock it out of the park? And then the other piece is, I wish I had this when I was a teen and when I taught. This book really serves so many.
Well, thank you. I mean, we're super jazzed that you liked it. When I started my career as a high school math teacher, my philosophy of education was that it was the job of teachers to help each student become the best version of themselves. And we're passionate about that idea and really talking about what teens really need to learn and succeed in the world. So that is, what brings us to from student to stand out.
I love that. And Marnie and I were both teachers. So, of course, we have to
Yeah, we're
share
gonna have the
today's
objectives on
objectives.
the board. Yes. We want
Right?
that check mark on our performance review, right?
Yes, there is a live eval going on. But don't worry, those of you in the audience today, we're not going to be asking for a choral response or for you to put this into student friendly language. You're okay. We're going to talk about the patterns that hold students back from truly being not only college and career ready, but really life ready. Am I crazy to think that you all may want the same thing? I really don't think so. The business of you is here to help you learn a framework to help students stand out and be successful. Additionally, you'll take away some ideas that you can implement easily and to make an impact right after this webinar today. So let's kick it
Or
off.
maybe in August when school actually starts.
But you know what? They're putting in work today. We were talking about
Yeah, and we're
this right
super
before,
thankful
right?
that you all have joined on a really hot, stinky day in July. Anyway, go on.
Yes, yes. And so let's kick things off with a quick reality check. I'll fire away a few questions to spotlight the pain points that we're seeing. Then Nick and Marnie will showcase their game plan and share some pro tips. And we'll close it out with Q&A. Sound like a plan, y'all?
Yeah, let's do
Let's
it.
do it.
Right. Let's do it. So before having this discussion, we wanted a little bit more info to kind of test some of our assumptions. And so I created a survey that I sent to a number of educators before and during the ISTE conference, which just happened earlier this month. And I wanted to share some of those sentiments that I came across. Here's one of them. We sent out this question: 85% of success is determined by soft skills. We got that from Carnegie in their research. The question was, do you think schools have enough focus on soft skills? Unsurprisingly, most folks do not feel very confident. And I want to call out too, nobody feels extremely confident. That's kind of scary. These are coming from not just like new educators or people new to the field. These are seasoned vets that we asked to fill out this survey. So this is the cream of the crop. And it's not surprising. And so what a blessing that you all are doing the work that you're doing. And let's dive a little deeper into one of the other questions. Essentially, what do schools and students need? And we got some free form responses here. And we're seeing things like a place on social media where parents and students and educators can engage on this. Additionally, the ability to tell and write their story as a former ELA teacher and yeah, a big fan of somebody like Anita Archer, where she's saying every day we read, we write, we speak. I really think we need to adapt in light of AI, 21st century, right? That's an antiquated term already, but these future skills and really read, write, and tell our story or have students tell their own story. And
Yeah.
so this person additionally added students today are content consumers. We need them to be creators of their own lives. So essentially going from scrolling on TikTok, Instagram, etc., to creating that content that's going to advance what's really possible in the real world. And then lastly, networking and other adulting skills. So important. This is how you and I connected, right, Marnie?
Yeah, networking for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I thought all of the responses to this survey were really pretty interesting, and we're going to speak to some of them later on. Like I mentioned, I started out as a math teacher and went into administration before transitioning to the world of ed tech. I ran customer success until Nick and I decided to start a company together, right? And that's how I became CEO of a software company. But if you woke me in the middle of the night and asked what I do, I would tell you that I was a teacher. So everything I see and do, I really think through that teacher lens. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the problem that we were seeing, because case in point, in the business world, when I would post a job, like a job posting on LinkedIn, I would get an automated response within seconds, 37 responses the first time I ever posted a job. And within an hour, I'd have 234 automated posts in my inbox, which for a teacher is like picking the best applicant from their Scantron. Like, oh, that's a nice number 2 pencil, bubble they did there, right? How do you pick in this world of automation, who should stand out? And as we considered that problem, Nick and I aren't shy. So we will, to your point, Scott, network and meet folks all over the place. I actually ran into an English supervisor at a doctor's appointment. And I was telling her about kind of the research that we'd seen, that 85% of success is based on soft skills, and the whole notion of students struggling to tell their own story and standing out. And she said, I will tell you what my English teachers would say to that. And I thought, yeah, I'd love to hear what your English teachers think of that. She said, when curriculum switched so that students had to cite text-based evidence for everything, so that we could determine what was true and false on the internet, although albeit we still struggle with that for sure, that what came out of the curriculum was students being able to connect their story as supporting evidence for their thinking. And so I think that's really important to think about how we got into this spot today, where we are seeing folks where students are struggling to be able to tell their story. And we see it a lot all over the place. If you're in the chat, feel free to pull up the chat if this resonates with you. We'd certainly love to hear it.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts on that. Additionally, we're going to launch another poll. So you should be seeing on your screen right now either of these questions, or if you're joining live, it'll come up, and there it goes right there.
Yep.
So here's the question. where do your students struggle the most with standing out? Is it one, they can't tell their story clearly? Two, they're unsure how to turn their experiences into strengths? Three, they struggle to connect values to action? Or four, all of the above, really, all of these. And I'm seeing some
So
things.
We're getting a lot
Oh,
of all
yeah,
the above
so
right
it's
now.
interesting.
yeah,
What would
yeah.
happen is they would respond to the first one and then would switch to like, so
Yeah.
the first one kept getting more votes and then all of the above would land. Yeah. Okay, so we've got 22% said they clearly can't tell their story. 11% they aren't sure how to turn their experiences into strengths, and then 67% all of the above. So yeah, that it's not really a surprise. So we appreciate that sort of the problem is identified, and we're not crazy.
Yeah.
So along those lines, what problem were you seeing that made you decide the business of you needed to be a thing?
Yeah, Scott. So I'll start and I'll give you a little background. Over my career, I was really lucky enough to be employee number single digit at 4 self-funded startups. And all of them had crazy success and we grew and we're talking like 8 and 9 figure businesses from scratch. And if there's one thing I learned through all of that, it's that the biggest driver of our success, and honestly, our biggest challenge at the same time, was hiring. It was the people decisions. And that's really what, made or broke us. And I became kind of obsessed with the question, what actually makes someone successful, in life and work, in personal lives? And in business world, what I kept seeing was this: the people who really thrived weren't always the ones with the best resumes or degrees. And conversely, some of the folks with the most talent, they just never got traction. So what I realized is it wasn't about intelligence and skill so much as it was that it came down to personal leadership, things like self-awareness, communication, showing up with consistency, doing what you'll say you'll do. And this is stuff that we sometimes call soft skills, but they're anything but soft when they're missing. And then as Marnie and I came together and we started working together, we realized something else. And that's that we were both having those same conversations at home with our kids around our kitchen tables. And we weren't necessarily talking about grades and GPA. We were talking about how you show up, how you treat people, and how you carry yourself. And ultimately, I think that's why we created the Business of You, to give students a way to think about their lives, um, the way you would think about building a company, make smart choices, set goals, take ownership, and become that kind of person others want to work with and follow.
It's Nick, I think you might have the polls up on your screen. We're seeing a rectangular box over top of your slides.
Oh, okay. How's that?
Much better.
There
Good.
we go.
So and it's not like we are making this up, right? One of our favorite books, if you are an educator and haven't read Adam Grant's Hidden Potential, we'll recommend that to you. So Adam Grant says, as more and more cognitive skills get automated, we're in the midst of a character revolution. So the way students are going to stand out is with those character and soft skills. The second thing is the Harvard Business Review came up with a study that showed that the number one indicator of leadership success is self-awareness. We're going to talk a lot about that. Self-awareness, again, not the skill that most people would say that's what's driving success in the world. And then this last fact is about colleges. Only 1 in 3 college students feel prepared for life after graduation. So imagine what that feels like for high schoolers, right? If only 1 feel like they're prepared, 1 in 3 feel like they're prepared after college, it's even, extrapolate that down to high school. And we talked to one administrator who said they'd worked on a college study that showed students were changing majors 5 to 7 times. So that is really the reality of what schools are dealing with in terms of college and career readiness.
And I'll add to that. That's amazing. That many changes. Wow.
Yeah.
The landscape is so wild right now from my perspective. When I was in the classroom, I noticed a pattern of success really outside of the classroom. And guess what? It wasn't determined, at least not much, by what we did in the classroom. My subject matter materials and the frameworks I taught and used were all aligned to the standards. It was all about these DOKs, 4Cs, right? 5 E's, ace the
All
question.
the acronyms are being met.
Right? But none of that taught life and how to be an all-star once those days of multiple choice questions and essays came to an end and went away. I saw this more widespread when I got into instructional technology, became a tech coach, and then even more so when I helped architect a series of STEAM labs across Northern California and then a virtual school. The problem just exacerbated. It was more and more. And I knew I had to do more to better help students and education institutions and those they serve. So I grew my perspective. And this all happened while I was at Canva. I knew I wanted to have a broader reach, and it led me to ask the question, what do students really need in order to stand out in the world today?
Yeah. Which is exactly what we're going to chat about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and when I first saw the title, The Business of You, I have to be honest, I thought, business? Really? Like, working for Canva, I'd been in that realm, but I couldn't see how's it going to work. Some students really have zero interest in that world, and the terms HR and especially sales can feel kind of corporate and scare people away. So why that framing?
Yeah, well, that's fair. But
Very fair.
but as you said earlier, Nick and I did sell a software company, and neither one of us have ever been accused of being too corporate. So that is not what we meant when we talk about the business of you. We use this metaphor really to help students take ownership and have some agency in building their own growth and success. And that's the key to it, that life isn't happening to them, right? That they are going to build it and they have to run it. That quote that you showed earlier was one of my favorites from all the feedback that we got, that folks are really worried that students are so busy being content consumers that they're not creating their own life, right? They're just following along blindly. And honestly, if you look about the internet, you will find plenty of thought leaders that say, the CEO of you, be the CEO of you. But everyone thinks about that. Students in particular think about that in terms of being their own boss. And then they're like, oh yeah, I'm the boss. Everything should just happen for me. But the reality of it is if you are the CEO of your own business, you are in charge of all of those other departments, like you mentioned. So we take a look at HR, in the real world. HR is the folks that hire and fire people. And when I was a student, I know the only time the first thing I knew of HR was that was who I turned my application into, and they would send out notes as to where my meetings were, right? I didn't really understand what HR was. But what if we turned that around and asked students to think of themselves as their own HR department and ask this question, would I hire me? Like, if you're a student, would you hire yourself? Parents, this is, yes, and bloodborne pathogen training. If you're a parent, having this conversation at the dinner table is an interesting one. And students, if they're in high school, they may resist having that, but they're going to think about that conversation. Would I hire myself? And then also, it's important for them to think about what are my values? And what values do I bring to others? So if we can start helping students understand their own, what we call personal operating system, right? They'll start to understand where they fit in this world, and what job would be a good fit for them, instead of just an HR director making that decision on whether or not they're a good fit.
So a couple more examples, Scott, you asked the question. So let's talk about marketing. In the real world, we know what it looks like when a brand nails their story. They catch our attention, they stick in our heads, and yeah, they get our money. I mean, that's why we watch the Super Bowl, right? It's for all those commercials to get their story. Well, guess what? The same thing applies to students. If they can learn to tell their story clearly, confidently, and in a way that's true to who they are, then things like college essays, interview questions, even networking conversations become way easier. They're not trying to sound impressive, they're just being them on purpose. And we're going to talk a lot about that. And that's very powerful. And then one more department we'll visit. Let's talk about finance. And this one hits very close to home
Dad
for
of
me.
college student.
Yes, yeah. I've got a 21-year-old son that thinks about money constantly and spends my money. But mostly it's how do I get more of it, without waking up early. But in the business of you, we flip the script and we ask students, what if you were your own chief financial officer? Could you honestly say I'd invest in me? And we don't just mean money, we mean time, energy, attention. Where are you spending your resources? Are you budgeting for your growth? Are you spending 90% of your energy on stuff that doesn't move you forward? That's the mindset shift we're talking about. We're helping them think like owners and not just passengers.
I mean, when they start thinking about time as an investment, then scrolling through social media is a question that they need to think about. Is that a good investment for you as a company? Right? When they have to take that accountability for that agency, I think that changes things.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And, I see it now. It's not really about business at all. It's just a thing that's familiar. In reality, it's really about personal development in the realest sense. There's so much more in the book, too, like what you have for sales, networking, a board of advisors, right? I wish I had a board of advisors when I was a kiddo growing up. It's so good. And that leads me to our next question, which you'll see I'm going to throw another poll up.
Yep, I'll throw it up on the screen.
Okay.
As soon as I can, there we go. You'd think it was my first day on Zoom.
And so those joining us live,
yeah, you'll be able to see it
what
in front of you now.
what you're seeing now is how much structured time do your students
sorry,
get
I
to
threw the wrong one. Let me start the other one. How about I send them this
Okay,
one?
forgive me.
No, that was my bad.
I'll wait for it to go up.
Yeah. End that poll. There we go. That's what I want to do. I'm gonna launch this one.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go. So how much structured time do your students get to reflect on who they are? I don't want to feed people, but I have an idea of what it is here. So option one, very little, it's squeezed in or skipped. Uh, During application season only, which is number two, or number three, occasionally an advisory or SEL, something along those lines, or four, regularly with purpose and structure. And I think you folks can kind of tell where we're going. You probably get a sense of where we are and where we're going.
I actually
Yeah.
love the fact that we've got some responses with regularly with purpose and structure.
Agreed, like points all around
Yeah.
that. Interesting that we clearly don't have many guidance counselors, because we've heard from guidance counselors that that's a real focus on, during application season, but that did not get any results. We have half the folks said very little, it's squeezed in or skipped. 40% occasionally an advisory or SEL, and 10% with regularly with purpose and structure. And to the folks that say very little, it's squeezed in or skipped, I think that was our goal for today, is to be able to give you some easy little things to be able to just to squeeze in to start thinking about this.
And I'll add something to that. I think even if you were somebody that put regularly with purpose and structure, like that's great. I think that speaks volumes to who's in the audience, because this isn't what we typically see when we're talking to folks. It'd be more so number one, maybe, two and three kind of sprinkled in there, depending on what your role is, where you are, and the temperature check of the district. And we're going to have some stuff for you. So stay tuned. And you may be asking this question, like, hey, your story's great, Nick and Marnie, but with so much to do, right? Because there definitely is, especially this day and age, right? Where we have all these things like funding, budget shortages, teacher shortages, whatever the things are.
Yeah.
Why should the audience listen to you?
Well, I mean, mainly because it works, right? The world is not becoming less automated. So when thousands of students are applying for jobs in schools, they are going to need to do the work to stand out, right? And we have had this conversation in classrooms and boardrooms and locker rooms, and like Nick said, our own living rooms and kitchen tables, right? And since I knew this webinar was coming up just last week, I was meeting with one of our mentees. So this is meet Calvin. Calvin was sent to us by a friend because, in the friend's words, Calvin is quiet. And he was told in an interview that he was all over the place. So he was struggling. He had not been able to get an internship when all of his friends had. So I asked if he would talk about what surprised him when he and I talked about thinking of himself like a business. So we're gonna hope we can hear Calvin. We've practiced, so
Here we
we should be
go.
able to.
Being able to tell a story, actually, because when I was originally learning interviews, prepping for them, it's very logical minded, like answer the question, tell them about this and this and this. But I think what the business of you brings out is like you can tell a story with it that combines like your values with what you want to do instead of just that robotic I guess answers that I was giving. So that, yeah, it surprised me that I'm able to tell myself for who I am in an interview and still do well in the interview.
I smile at him like he's my own kid.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh.
I think what Calvin said in that clip is just so important because learning to tell your story is really one of the most overlooked but powerful skills that any of us can build. And we don't really mean just any story. We mean your story, the one that connects the dots between what you've been through, what matters to you, and where you're headed. And that brings us really to, I think, the challenge, right? Which is, you know, we have a question up here, and these questions, in our view, it's so important for students to be able to answer questions like this. Specifically, is there a story that only they can tell? What makes them unique? Talking about challenges that they've faced and what they've taken from it, lessons learned. The question, have they ever questioned an idea and what made them do that? Have they ever challenged the status quo and can they articulate exactly why? Of course, what's something that you can talk about for hours and why? That really answers the question of what drives them, what motivates them. And then the one that I hate, what else should we know about you? What's that? Give me all the extras. But the important thing here is these aren't just great reflection questions. They're the actual questions behind most college essays. We're all familiar with the Common App. They have essay prompts, and they're all based on some form of these questions. And not only that, all of these are at the heart of job and internship interviews. And as an added bonus, we talk about networking a lot and the importance of it. They're the beginning of those meaningful conversations with the mentors, your peers, and your future employers. So, our challenge to ourselves, our challenge to everybody here is, are we giving students enough space and the right tools to answer these questions before someone else asks them in that really high stakes moment? Because when students know how to tell their story, they're not just prepared, they're anchored. They understand who they are, what they stand for, and where they're going.
This is the reality. That's like you said, they're abbreviated versions of the Common App, right? And Coalition, like they're the same types of questions. Students are going to need to be able to answer these, whether they're aiming for college or career readiness. So this is not just a college essay scenario. This is a life ready scenario.
That has me thinking. I'm curious what the audience has to say about that. How are they feeling? Quick temperature check. I'll have you queue up that poll. Here's
Got
the
the right one
question.
this time.
Nice, high five. If students had to answer these questions today, so right now, their story, challenge, values, how would they respond? Would they freeze or fumble? Would they make up a story? Would they guess what we want to hear? Would they sort of answer, but really without depth? Or would they absolutely crush it? Rare unicorns. And I'm really curious, especially with this audience, having had some of those strong answers in the beginning, be truthful here. If they're crushing it, let us know. And
Oh, tell us
hey,
about it.
maybe share a little bit in the chat too.
Absolutely. So it looks like the majority have they'd sort of answer, but without depth, which really doesn't surprise Nick and me at all. Like we see that all of the time. Ooh, I definitely have a story for they'd guess what we'd want to hear, right? They're trying to figure that out. And then the rest said they'd freeze or fumble and not know how to tell. We're going to tell more of that story later. I want to respect everyone's time, but yeah, that's not, those answers aren't surprising for sure.
I am shocked that nobody said they'd make up a story. I guess that was my own personal experience when I was reading my son's college application. I was like, when did this happen? I've never heard of this at all. Anyway.
So we want to take this one step further, right? Because being able to tell your story is not just about credentials. That's where they just don't go into much depth, right? They'll talk about GPAs, clubs, letters of recommendation. And that is how many students attack their college essays for sure. But the real differentiator of where they're going to stand out is if they can determine their value. So can a student connect their experiences, their strengths, and then their values into something that makes them memorable? So I want to go back to Calvin for a second. We helped him name his superpower.
I discovered about myself. I think the biggest thing was, and I mean, I think we nailed it right away, was that I'm very introverted. And we've really discussed how I've turned that into my greatest strength. Just even with the management position that I got using that. And that's something that I kind of like, I knew I was quiet, not the best at, making small talk and all of that type of stuff. But when I really sat down with you and analyzed it and figured out like, that's me. So I got to make the best of it. Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing that I learned about myself, but also was able to make it the most, I don't know, I guess the biggest advantage that I have now.
So it is interesting I wish I had gotten video of Calvin before we met, or at the very beginning, because to see how he owned introvertedness, right, with confidence and has learned to speak of it as his superpower and then got a management position because of it, I think that's really powerful. So we've kind of established the problem, and we want to give you some ways that you can help students solve the problem, some activities for you to take away. And yes, all these slides will be available. So no worries, no frantic screenshotting necessary. So we talk about Calvin now understanding his personal operating system, right? The things that make him tick. He knew he was quiet, but now he gets how that plays out in an important way. And that's really the whole goal of self-awareness. So what you're seeing on the screen are Nick's and my personal operating systems, right? And this is what we work with students to help them develop their own personal operating systems. We help them figure out their strengths, their weaknesses, motivators, demotivators, and then we help them connect these, and this is the critical part, to their experiences so they can tell their story. So honestly, taking a look at this, imagine connecting this next to our resume or our LinkedIn profile, right? I promise this is more fun to read than either of those things. And you learn more about us and whether we would be handy to work with, right? I haven't met a kid or an adult that likes to build resumes, but folks do like finding out who they are. So we wanted to give you a place to start with this. So this is the end goal, is for students to be able to understand their own operating system. And we're going to give you 3 little activities that you could do in classes tomorrow if you had them, but you still have another day of summer at least. So let's go ahead and take a look at, if they're going to run the business of themselves, we're going to start off in the HR department. So What is your biggest pet peeves on the screen? Would love, feel free to put in the chat your biggest pet peeve. I bet you can all think of one fairly easily. Scott, you got a pet peeve?
Yeah. Oh, it's in the chat.
Oh, drama.
Drama.
Yeah. Okay.
Stay away from drama.
So here's why it matters. I have 2 adult children at this point. If you called them today and asked my pet peeve, they would tell you mom hates filling out online forms, like with a white hot passion. So this is why it's important that you not just know skills and interests, but know people's likes, their strengths and weaknesses. I've always been good at math. I've always been very good at numbers. People all the time would tell me that I should be an accountant. But think in 1988, when I was going into college, trying to pick a career, because I knew I didn't like tedious things like online forms and filling in forms, like that tediousness, I would make a terrible accountant, right? So when you start knowing your motivators and demotivators, you start to be able to identify like, well, I might have some strengths or some skills in one area, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be good at a job that entails that. The other piece that I love for this, and I think you all yesterday accused me of a life hack on this one. What's the question that everybody hates on job interviews? What's your biggest weakness, right? I tell the students to lean right into that one because this is only going to help them. If somebody asks me what's my biggest weakness, I will say, I am so glad you asked because I hate filling out forms with a white hot passion. So if this job has a bunch of expense reporting, C-125 forms I have to fill out, a lot of really tedious tasks, I'm not a good fit for this job, so you shouldn't hire me for it. And that's super powerful when you can say that. And of course, I say, now, that said, I do know my strengths, right? So I'm going to get stuff done, girl. And I'm also a rule follower. So if I have to fill in expense reports, I will block the time and muscle my way through it. But if it's more than 5 to 10% of the job, this probably won't be a good fit.
Oh, I love that. And along those lines of, which job not to take, that's one of my takeaways here, hearing that. On social, I saw the laugh test from some of your social media content.
Yeah.
Tried it out in an interview. Not only did the interviewer not laugh, they hardly smiled, meaning not a really good
Not a good fit. Yeah. So if you haven't followed our social media, we talk about the laugh test, which is when you're in an interview, you should find a connection with everyone you're interviewing with, enough so that at some point they smile with you or laugh with you because you've built a connection. And if you know Scott for a hot minute, you know that if they're not going to laugh with you in an interview, like that is not a place that you should be working, right?
Absolutely.
So that's why knowing who you are and what doesn't sit well for you is really critically important.
And so many people ignore that, right? They're just trying to follow the happy path when they're interviewing, especially younger adults. And at the end of the day, they end up in a position because they didn't communicate those types of things, right? Where they're not really enjoying where they are. And it just ends up causing more stress and anxiety, which none of us want, for sure. So we started with pet peeves because, well, honestly, it's easier, it's fun, and it gives students a quick window into what demotivates them and what frustrates them. It's easier to identify. But in the world of self-awareness, students really need to understand their core values, what makes them tick, right? And on the screen, you see a list of, just a sample list of core values. But let's be honest, this part really can feel overwhelming. And anytime you're asking students to do self-reflection, it's uncomfortable, right? Ask adults to do self-reflection. I get uncomfortable just thinking about it, but you got to force yourself to do it. But, you show a student a list like this of 45 values, and they're like, yeah, I think I'm kind. I'd like to be creative, and I know I'm fair. Can I just circle everything and be done?
Yeah. So, I mean, to your point, I've done this with adults who absolutely do struggle with it. And honestly, I'm sure most of the folks on this call are most of these things. I know many of the folks on the call, and they absolutely are all of these wonderful words. So how do you narrow it down to like the ones that really feel like you? So we have found a good trick for this, which is after students find their pet peeve, they think about the opposite of that. So what is the opposite of, I just talked about hating filling out forms, right? And if I think about why I hated, what was it getting in the way of? When I look at this list, some of the words like obviously go away. Maybe patience could come into play, but pragmatism starts to stand out. But when I hit the word efficiency, because I just been thinking about how mad forms make me feel, efficiency, I stopped looking. Like that's it. That feels like me. Right. And that can change over time, but that's a great way to grab something that you feel like you've got a story about as well. So helping kids connect the idea that we always talk about, like how you do anything is how you do everything, helps them start to figure out who they are so they can tell their story.
Yeah, but again, it isn't easy just to sit yourself down to do this reflection or even recognize it. So we wanted to find a way to make it real, interesting, and fun for students by thinking about choices they make every day. In the book, The Business of You, we have a lead character, Sydney, who's given an app where she is given scenarios to work through that and help her figure out her core values. We're actually building that app, and we'd like to show you why helping students think about their day-to-day choices will help them really focus in on their core values. So this is just some sample screenshots, one of the first experiences in the app, and it's a quick series of questions based on real world scenarios. In this case, you're asked to lead a project. How do you feel about that? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you neutral to it? These simple responses start to paint a picture for us of who that student is and what they value. And over time, we begin to see patterns. And from those patterns, they begin to understand their personal operating system. Not the one they think they should have or aspire to have, but the one that's actually real for them. And that's such a key point.
So we're super excited about this, but this is not going to come out till the end of the year. So, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't start using these ideas right now, right? Get your students thinking about pet peeves, core values early and often, and how they connect with those experiences.
And there's more. We don't stop there. We really push, we push our students to make sure that they validate those values.
Yeah.
And to no surprise, if you've heard us speak the last 42 minutes, how do we do that? We do it through storytelling. We ask students, can you tell our story from your childhood where that value showed up, right? Because if you think about it, when they can connect a value to a real story or memory, that's when it goes from just a word on a list, to a real part of who they are. And often that story is where their superpower lives. And here's the best part. Once they know that story, they're ready for those college essays that we talked about, the interview questions, even those networking conversations, because they're not scrambling for the right answer. They're just sharing who they already know themselves to be.
So lots of teachers do a get to know you activity at the beginning of the year, right? And this is really when students can start developing their personal operating system. But teachers don't often have students then further reflect upon this, right? Like they collect this for themselves so they can get to know the students, but it's just as important for students to start connecting this information to, again, how they're going to write college essays, et cetera. So we need to think about this in terms of the college career readiness activity, that currently what we see are a lot of skill-based, interest-based things. And if we can combine what they're getting from that with who they are in terms of their values, we get a much stronger story, right? If we start layering in their core values, their strengths, their weaknesses, they better set themselves up for career choices. They're better to get a letter of recommendation from someone who actually understands the real version of them, and gets a stronger letter of recommendation. And again, the college essays and interviews, which we've mentioned a ton of times. I did this activity with a group of, so there was a student leadership group at a high school, and a bunch of students were in the room, and I went over to one group and asked what their core value was, and one of them said communication, that was their superpower. And the kid next to him just sort of giggled and said communication. And I mean, I was born on Tuesday, but not last Tuesday. That was my favorite assistant principal line to use. But as a teacher, I knew exactly what was going on here, right? And when I used what Nick said, like, tell me a childhood story to validate your superpower, the original student who said communication immediately said, I've always been told, since I was little, that I was really good at explaining things and helping people understand any miscommunication. When I asked the second student, he had no story. He had nothing. He didn't connect, right? He was just copying what the cool kids said and didn't really reflect on this for himself. So it's really important to have these, to start getting students to connect their stories, not just their interests, and not just write down words. Otherwise, it doesn't make the long-term impact that we want. I am putting in the chat a link to a Facebook group. It's a brand spanking new. So if you smell fresh paint, it's because we just created it. But in there is the download to this PDF. We'll put the recording to today along with all the slides in there. You will also get an email tomorrow about this, but if you want to join in the conversation and grab the PDF like right now, you can go. Well, it'll take a second because we'll have to accept you into the group, but we will accept that as soon as we're off the call. So we hope to see you in that group so you can use these activities with your students tomorrow.
I love it. And you'll see me in there. I jumped into so you can read a little bit more about me. I'm excited to chat with you all as well. And a couple questions, Marnie and Nick.
Yeah.
Why should we spend time doing this? And what happens if we don't?
Well, I'll take the softball pitch, the first one, because I feel like we have stated that one. If students use the business of you, they pitch themselves better, right? They can network better. And honestly, I've only ever written a resume before I officially interviewed for a job once. Every other time it was a network that got me a job. And they have clarity in decision making, so they aren't blindly following a path, right? They're actually creating it. So I'll let Nick take the harder one. What happens if they don't do it, Nick?
I think it's the most common reason people come to us in the first place, which is they're stuck, right? We're trying to get people unstuck. And it's not just, if you're not doing this, there's chances are much better that you're going to get stuck, or you might be drifting and just kind of going through the motions. I think something that is equally as bad, if not worse, is we find a lot of people just following the paths of others. They're not putting in the work to understand what truly motivates them. And they say, okay, my friend Billy is doing this, I'm going to do it too. And they go so far down the path, and then 3 years later, they're into a career or, whatever they're doing next. And they're like, oh my gosh, I hate this stress, anxiety. I need to start over. And I think that's worse. And then finally, I think by not doing this, you're potentially missing out on opportunities that were totally in reach. And that's the pet peeve of mine, is missing out on taking advantage of something. I that drives me, is okay. So many of us have opportunities that are out there that are within reach if we just put in the time. And for those that don't, they're in our opinion, they're not working to become the best versions of themselves.
And that's what we want, not just for ourselves, not just for our families and those we serve. We really want that for everybody, right? Educators essentially have a very similar why, and that's to do good in the world and to help others become the best, if not better, versions of themselves. And I want to encourage the audience as we start to wrap things up. If you have questions for Marnie and Nick, start putting those in the chat or in the Q&A section. It's down at the bottom. And back over to you. I think you got a special surprise for us.
Well, I definitely wanted to share one more Calvin clip. So I let Calvin read an advanced copy of The Business of You, and his reaction was, I'm going to make my brother do this, right? I showed him mock-ups of the app, and he's like, he needs this. He's going to do it. So I asked him why he thought his brother needed to do this.
I was thinking about how he's going to have to do college essays and stuff, which I dreaded so much because I couldn't think of a story. I was like, oh, I have to make up a story now and, you know, try to apply to whoever's reading it. And I struggled with it so much. And I just thought it would be awesome for him because I've had such success figuring out the stories that I want to tell about myself that I think truly show myself. I mean, I don't see how anyone can't have success with it if I could. So I thought it would be awesome for my brother, just college essays, even regular essays in general.
Yeah.
I think it just shows more, like you know, the person can really tell when you're telling your story. There's a lot more effort into it instead of something that's made up. And even if they can't tell, then you at least feel better that you were able to convey yourself. So I think it would help him even mentally, academically. Yeah, I just think it would be awesome for kids going into college as well as kids in college.
Yeah, what a great takeaway. What I'm hearing from that is just multifaceted empowerment, right? He's saying, hey, this is good for kiddos before college, in college, and I imagine outside of college.
I mean, I've had friends who are 57 that are aiming to get a new job that read the book and like, oh my gosh, I interview so much better. Yep. But yeah, Calvin, I think, tells the story well, for sure.
You got one more to add to that list. Yours truly here. I'm seeing some of those questions come in. Here's one for you all.
Yeah.
How are people doing this with so much going on in their schedules?
Yeah, no, that is a great question. And we sent the book out to a lot of advanced readers. We've talked to heads of schools, guidance counselors, assistant superintendents, one retired superintendent who said she wanted to come back and just so she could help students learn more about themselves. And we're hearing a lot of different strategies. So I love to share this because, you know, as the poll said earlier, people are just finding ways to squeeze that in. So one district said they're going to take a look at their health curriculum to see where the mental health components in this overlap. We hear a lot in flex periods, advisory periods, homerooms. Guidance counselors, whenever they're assigned to go into, I know in many of the districts we work with, into English classes, they're going to incorporate some of these things into those types of classes. And really wherever they're incorporating SEL or CASEL standards is what a lot of the high schoolers are talking about. And Nick, do you want to talk about some of the higher ed partners that we've talked to?
Yeah, we've gotten the opportunity to work with a lot of higher ed partners, and we've shared a copy of the book. And you know, some of those are in running leadership programs within different university systems. There's talk about a lot of universities have, you know, 1-credit courses for freshman orientation, and having this. There's a number of those 1-credit courses or leadership type programs where they're talking about including our book as part of their curriculum. So I think just in general, the sense is that, all right, we get it. Kids, especially like Marnie mentioned the Adam Grant quote earlier, in 2025, when skills themselves are being commoditized, it is critically important that students develop these soft skills, the human skills to stand out and differentiate themselves. And we're pleased to hear people think that our book is a way to help them do that.
I love that. And kind of an add-on, kind of like a takeaway for me is you have to be perpetually ready to tell your story. You never know when you're going to meet someone who's willing to invest in you, whether it be an educator, a future boss, or somebody famous.
I mean, honestly, just connecting you to somebody else, right? I think we should stop saying the word elevator pitch and start saying the word pickleball pitch, because I've had to tell my story more times in the first minute that I've met someone on a pickleball court, right? But you never know. And then literally one of those people said, oh, I work with school systems to do this. Why don't you come talk to me? Right. You just never know how it happens or where it happens for kids.
Yeah, can't hate on it too much though. I did sell in 30 seconds a product on a 30-second elevator. So
Oh, I'm not saying that your pickleball pitch. I mean, your pickleball pitch needs to be less than 30 seconds. Somebody's going to call a score. You better be ready to go, you know? I love Lindsay put in the chat that that we should work with the workforce development or workforce investment boards. Those are exactly the type of folks that kind of really need to hear this message, because the way the career prep programs are going, where they're really funneling students toward a skill or a task, if they don't take a look at the values of the students, I think that makes a huge. I think it's just doing a disservice to the opportunities for students.
yeah, quick call out there too. Those on the call and those listening to the recording, hey, if you and your friends are at the BOCES, County Office of Ed, Educational Service Center, RISAs, etc., connect with Nick and Marnie.
Oh, we'd love that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's a great opportunity.
So we put in the chat, we do have a website. So it is thebusinessofyou.ai. We are everywhere on social as Blue, the business of you. And I know that I wanted to say two other things. One, the book will officially be out August 15th. So if you think like, oh yeah, I think this might be good for our students, August 15th is the date. If you're thinking I want a classroom set, because we've had quite a few folks ask us that one, you should just reach out to us directly because we can get you a discount. Otherwise, you'll be able to find us on Amazon. But I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat our email. It's info@thebusinessofyou.ai. Again, tomorrow you'll get an email with this recording, the PDF, the slide deck, etc. You could always reply to that if you're interested. But I think, yeah. Anything else on that, Nick, Scott? Sorry. I didn't want to run out of time without saying that.
I think you said it all. This has been so much fun.
I think just a quick rundown of what we covered. We covered a lot in terms of identifying what key problem areas are, what key challenges are, such as kids not being equipped to tell their story, not really sure how to really prepare for life after school or even life in school. There's no reason they need to wait, right? Let's take the Calvin story. Yes, he may be a rare unicorn, but what you're saying is with a little bit of help, many students can be like Calvin. It's really the tools, the process, the frameworks that you all are sharing in the books that help the Calvins of the world succeed. And what a phenomenal story. He's a manager already. Like, how's this even possible?
I kid you not. And that was a week and a day after we first met. Like, that's how quickly it just made an impact and how he was able to communicate himself. It was really him doing the reflection and how to communicate.
And then just a reminder again, get the book. It comes out August 15th. Tag Marnie and Nick and the business of you on social media or wherever you are. Again, if you need those classroom sets, go ahead and reach out directly. All the information will be in the email coming out tomorrow. And
we'll see you in the Facebook group.
That's it. Yeah.
I let so many people in the door already. We'll see you there.
Scott,
right,
thanks for moderating. It's been awesome.
Thanks so
my
much.
pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Oh, are there more Q&As? I think, did we get them all?
There were no questions in there.
Okay, so, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Oh, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Lindsay. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Take care. Here, do you guys want to hang back for just a few minutes?